welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode number 92. And today's episode title is Everyone Needs to Prepare for the Economic Collapse, because it is coming, and coming faster than everyone thinks it is. And before I get started, I just want to thank everyone for listening, and I know it's a little rough this week. I've been doing my reports a little bit later, but I'm on the road, and today I was able to do this a little bit earlier than I thought, so that's why it's coming out earlier at this point. Now the markets, if we look around since yesterday when Ben Bernanke talked about tapering and how he was going to cut back, oh, by the way, which they're not going to do, the markets started to drop in Asia, Europe, and here in America. Right now the markets are down around 200 points, 262 points at this time. Gold has been smacked down below 1,300. And why are they doing this? Well, you have to remember that the only thing that was propping up the stock market was the Federal Reserve by giving the money to the banks by buying their toxic assets, instructing them to take that money and buy stocks so the stock market rises. And they were doing this at $40 to $45 billion a month. And guess what? The Fed owns land, and the banks are pumping up the market. And basically when normal everyday investors hear that the Fed is not going to pump up the market, they're thinking, holy crap, that's the only thing that's keeping it up, so we need to pull our money out of this before it collapses. And I said in my previous episodes that billionaires already have been pulling their money out because we're at the height now, and they realize that the market is going to start crumbling down. And everyone has to remember, the stock market is not the gauge of the economy. This is completely separate, and there's a disconnect between the economy and the stock market. This happened during the Great Depression. Right before the stock market collapsed, the stock market was at its all-time highs and started to fluctuate at its all-time highs, just like we're seeing now. But the economy was having many, many problems. People were losing work. Credit was drying up. But no one realized this because all eyes, again, were on the stock market. Same thing happened in 2008. Go back and check it out. The stock market was at its all-time high, around 14,000 or so. It started to fluctuate at the top, but the economy was doing very, very poorly prior to October of 2008. And people couldn't sell their homes. Subprime was an issue, and credit was drying up. People's homes that used to were sold in a week or so, now we're going 6-7 months before they were sold. And we're seeing this today. We're seeing that the economy, the amount of people who are on food stamps, the amount of people who are looking for employment, the amount of people who are just trying to get by and can't do it, and all eyes, again, have been moved to the stock market because this is how they hypnotize the people to think that there's nothing wrong. And I done this in a previous episode where I said it's like Lord of the Rings, and all eyes are kept on the stock market while other things are happening around the people, and no one really realizes it. No one understands what is going on. But today the markets are down, and it's all around the world because of what Ben Bernanke said. So what I'm thinking is they're smacking down gold. And why are they doing this? Because they do not want anybody to take their money out of equities and put them into gold or anywhere else. Because you have to remember, a couple weeks back, Ben Bernanke dared people to get into the equity market. He dared them. Can you imagine if you listened to him right now? But anyhow, he dared people to get into the market. And now, since the market has been going down, it's a total of almost 466 points in the last 2 days. He can't show that gold is a safe haven for people to put their money in, precious metals, I should say. So they're smacking that down, making people think that, oh no, that's a terrible place to go. So either put your money in the dollar or put it in the equity market, which they'd rather you do is put it in the equity market. And what I'm thinking they're going to do, they're going to use the plunge protection team, the high frequency traders. They're going to pump more money into the system to try to pump this back up. Now, is it going to happen today? Probably not. But Friday might end on a better note than it is today. But they will do it. I'm going to tell you right now, by Monday or Tuesday, you'll see the market going back up. That's what I'm thinking they're going to do, because again, they have to keep this going. They cannot stop. They got to continually pump up the market and keep all eyes on the stock market while everything else falls around and crumbles around everyone. Let's get into the economic collapse news today. Now this is very important. Russia and China to seal an unprecedented oil contract which will bypass the US dollar completely, and their deal is worth more than $60 billion. And the article goes on to say a major contract, it would not be an exaggeration to call it an unprecedented contract, with the Rosneft company has been drafted. Prospective crude deliveries to China will top hundreds of millions of tons and exceed $60 billion in the dollar equivalent. And this is going, they don't need the U.S., they don't need the Middle East, and this is a huge, huge blow to the Western powers and the U.S. reserve currency. And they are making their own deals and basically bypassing everything. And when a lot of countries are starting to bypass the dollar, make deals in trading in other currencies, and what happens is, since they do not need the US dollar, they kind of send them back to the US. More dollars that hit the US, and this was in a previous, I don't know, maybe 10 episodes back, as more countries do not use the US dollar as their reserve currency, that money is going to come back to the United States, and some of it has, and more of it's going to. That means there's more currency in the market, which means inflation. That means there's more dollars in the system. More dollars, less value of the dollar, means prices of things. Actually, we shouldn't say that. Prices of things do not go up. The amount of dollars that it takes to buy something, you need more of. So when something was $1 and you had $1, that's all it was. But now your currency, when it's valued less, you need more of it to buy the same exact thing. And that's really what we should be saying. We shouldn't really say things go up. We should say our value of our currency is decreasing, and that's why it takes more dollars. Okay, let's move on here. The bond implosion has officially begun. And basically what they're saying is the primary driver of stocks for the last 4 years has been the hope of more Fed stimulus. And now that the Fed is saying that they're going to taper, we're going to see the bonds start to falter. And this goes on to say that this hope has put a floor under all assets prices as market participants knew the Fed was involved in the markets. As a result, everything, stocks, bond, commodities, even currencies, has been artificially propped up. And basically, they're looking, this article goes, take a look at the spike in the 10-year Treasury yield. And basically, I think Max Kaiser said in the spring that we're going to have a bond collapse, and a lot of others have said we were going to have a bond collapse coming 2013, the springtime. But, no one can be exact in predicting something. So, it could be the spring, it could be the summer, it might be the fall. But that is going to happen. And there was another article that said more to come. And we know the Fed has been propping everything up, and this goes into say the economic fundamentals were not supporting the lofty levels of the market, which had rested upon one thing and one thing alone, which was liquidity. And basically, since the Fed kind of proved it yesterday by saying they're going to taper and the markets take a plummet, they go down because everyone was riding the wave of the Fed easy money and them printing. And basically that's all the Fed knows how to do is print. But they knew what they were doing. They knew that they were propping up the market. They knew that this was going to be a major, major collapse, and this was all done on purpose. So when everyone, and this is why he said, I dare you to get into the stock market, they wanted, the central bankers I'm talking about, they wanted everyone in, so when this thing collapses, they steal the people's wealth. I mean, how much wealth was lost in 2008? 38% of the people lost their wealth. This is going to be unprecedented when this thing comes tumbling down. And also you have to remember, the Fed is printing a button and creating money out of thin air. And what are they buying with it? They are purchasing toxic assets. What does that mean? They are buying real assets, real estate with paper, digital, fake money that really didn't exist. But now, can you imagine if you could do that? If you sat home and you just said, oh, this piece of paper, I'd like to buy that car, and just hand them a piece of paper which is worth nothing, and now you have a car, or taking that piece of paper and saying, I'd like to buy that house, and now you own a house. Well, they're doing this at $45 billion a month. They are purchasing all of this real assets, which is real estate. Now, the Fed owns all this real estate. Why are they doing this? Well, let's see. A lot of the countries own treasury bonds. If the U.S. defaults, there has to be collateral. And the Fed owns the real estate. A lot of the land around America, like the green preserves and the national parks, those are being used as collateral to pay off countries that when we default, that is already going to be used to pay off these countries. And I mean, this whole thing is a complete scam and a complete setup to cover their asses, and we are held with what? The bill. I mean, the national debt of $17 trillion, which is more than 17, we owe someone, which is the Fed and central bankers, this money. And this is why we saw this in Cyprus. When you owe this and the country is collapsing and banks are collapsing, you owe this money. So they're going to take it from you. How? Through bail-ins. Here you go. We're going to take your money and trade you for this worthless paper, for others worthless paper, and this is what the central bankers do to countries, because they have no allegiance to countries, they don't care about the countries, and they want their real hard assets. And when the bail-ins are not enough money, because they know it's not going to be enough, they go after the gold, they go after the land, they go after the gas, they go after the oil, real things for paper nothing. And that's what happens here. So let's move on here. Now, Bank of America employees are coming out saying that they were told to lie about the foreclosure practices. Now, we kind of all knew this, but basically what banks were doing, and I have a couple people that I know that haven't paid their mortgage in a year and a half. The banks aren't foreclosing. They want to keep all of these homes on the books to keep their balance sheets propped up. So they don't want to foreclose. They want to act, and it's creative accounting, where they're showing that no, all these houses aren't foreclosed. They're still good, and we're still doing good. So they don't want to sell them and foreclose on the properties until the real estate market goes back up and they can get something for them. Plus, since the Federal Reserve is buying up the toxic assets, there's no incentive for them to foreclose on anyone, or because they figure, well, we know $45 billion is coming in each month. We'll just wait for the Fed to come around and snatch these up, and we'll get the cash for it. And basically, this article goes on to say, employees of Bank of America say they were encouraged to lie to customers and were even rewarded for closing on homes, staffers of the financial giant claim in new court documents. And they had the signing scandal, and basically this was to get more homes on their books, and they I don't know if everyone has heard these stories, but there were people who had their mortgages completely paid off and they owned their houses outright, but the banks were saying that they own them and they were foreclosing on them, or because they were putting these houses on their books to prop up their balance sheet. And this whole thing, because all these banks are insolvent, they will not be able to last through the next collapse. And that's why, if you look at all the terms of service and you look at the FDIC Bank of England document, which was created in December of 2012, they are switching from bailouts to bail-ins, and just like in Cyprus, they are going to freeze your money, take their money that they need from your accounts, and put capital controls into effect where you're only allowed to access a certain portion of your money. So if you have 100 or 200 or 50,000 in the bank, you will allowed to take out 300 a day. The rest will be gone. Other will be turned into bank stock, and the other portion will be frozen. Now, we can tell that the economy is not doing well, and the stock market can say whatever. It's an illusion, and because Caterpillar, basically the collapse in Caterpillar in North American sales pretty much has completely dried up. And Caterpillar released its May 2013 dealer statistics, breaking down the 3-month rolling average for machine retail sales. Curiously, unlike in previous months when Asia and Pacific, China was the worst performing region on a year-over-year basis. In May, it was the U.S. that showed the worst results. Just how bad? Retail sales in the U.S. clocked at a negative 16% clip, just barely above the negative 18% drop in April. And basically, that's why we see retail stores back in, I think it was January or February, when it came out that Best Buy, Radio Shack, GameStop, Barnes & Noble were all closing stores. If the economy is good, you're not closing 300, 600, 700 stores and laying off these people. You're expanding. But again, with so many Americans out of work and can't find jobs, the last thing they do is retail. So that's why you see all of these stores closing. And for the government and the Fed to tell us that everything is okay is just absolutely ridiculous, because what did they do to make it and keep this illusion going? They changed the calculation for GDP, they changed the calculation for unemployment, and they changed the calculation for inflation. Now on the x22report.com site, I track the inflation of things, and yes, I started later. I started this early this year. But before that, I noticed things going up and up and up. And just recently, I know I have milk at $3.75. In the stores now, milk has gone up to $3.85 where I live. So it's already gone up another 10 cents. So we can see, and also a lot of manufacturers are shrinking their products down to try to keep the price level so people don't realize what's going on. But again, I mean, I have at Breyer's Ice Cream, but also other people have told me other products are shrinking, where you might have gotten 10 items in a package and now you're only getting 8. But they try to make the packaging look like it's still the same size and you're still getting the same amount, but you're not. Listen, I even notice when I buy sun lotion, we used to get these huge tubes of copper tone, and from the previous year, when I look at the tube, it's more money, but it's a smaller package now. And that was from a year ago, because we still had the older tubes, and we're noticing that that the product has shrunk and the price has creeped up. All right, let's move on here. Breaking, fierce fighting is going on in the Syrian capital, Damascus, as the government forces are trying to recapture territory lost to rebels. And basically, the Assad and his Syrian army are pushing the rebels out. And you have to remember, the rebels are hired mercenary soldiers. 90-something% of them are not even Syrian. and they have nothing to do with Syria. Basically, they are hired by our agencies here in the U.S. government and in Israel, and they are put into place to try to ramp up the revolution or civil war, whatever you want to call it, in Syria. But everything has been backfiring. The propaganda of chemical weapons that the president was trying to show everyone that they're using, the UN came out and said no, the rebels have been using it, and the United States wanted them to revise the report. So basically the report came out and said the rebels and the Syrian government were using them. But we know this is all propaganda. The president was trying, the central bankers, the U.S. government was trying to use this propaganda to push the American people in Congress into war. But the polls have come out, and Congress and the American people want nothing to do with going to war or helping Syria. Most of the people say Syria should help themselves and the U.S. should not even be there. And the only reason we're there is because the central bankers and the U.S. government need to put Syria back on the reserve note, which is the U.S. dollar, because they're trading their oil and other goods without using the U.S. dollar, and they need to put a central bank in there to loan out money with interest. And it is a direct path to Iran, because Iran has an agreement with Syria. If Syria gets into trouble and goes to war, Iran would back them up. And our main goal is to get into Iran and reverse everything that has happened there, put a central bank back in there, and make sure they trade their oil in the Federal Reserve, because this is the only way the system stays up. If all countries use the U.S. dollar as the reserve currencies, and more countries are not using the U.S. dollar, and this is why we're having this huge problem. Australia with China, India with China, Brazil with China are all not using the U.S. dollar. Iran, Syria, that's why we had to go into Iraq, Lebanon, Libya. We had to switch them back to the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. And basically what's happening is the U.S. can't keep up with all the countries switching. And even North Korea was in the midst of making a deal with Iran of trading the oil without using the U.S. dollar, and that's why all that propaganda was flaring up with North Korea using nuclear weapons and of mass destruction, because as the deal was going on, they were, making a case of why we need to go into there. And basically when the deal was already set, notice how the news just disappeared and their focus is back onto Syria. Because if they can get into Syria and Iran, they don't have to worry about North Korea, because once they switch Iran, they put a central bank in there, North Korea has no choice but to buy the oil from Iran in U.S. dollars. See how this works? So basically, that's why you don't even hear anything about North Korea anymore. Isn't it amazing how all of a sudden everything just disappeared? All right, let's move on here. Now, there was an article that says why states must nullify unconstitutional acts of Congress. Instructions from Hamilton, Madison, and Jefferson tell us this. And this article goes on to say that the U.S. Constitution, which created the federal government, permits Congress to make laws only on those few objects which are listed in the Constitution. The objects on which Congress has authority to make laws applicable throughout our country are itemized at Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 1 through 16 of and in a few of the amendments. Number 2, our framers, our founding fathers, understood that civil governments seek to expand power at the expense of the people, and when they do so, their acts are void and invalid. Thus, in Federalist Number 33, Hamilton says, "But it will not follow that acts of the large society, the federal government, which are not pursuant to its constitutional powers, but which are invasions of the authorities of the smaller societies, the states, will become the supreme law of the land. These will be merely acts of usurpation and will deserve to be treated as such." And that is what Hamilton said about that. And he goes on, number 3, Hamilton shows in Federalist number 28, 7th paragraph, that if the federal government invades the rights of the people, they can use the state government as the instrument of redress. And he goes on to say, in a confederacy, the people may be said to be the masters of their own fate, power being almost always the rival of power. The general federal government will stand ready to check the usurpations of the state governments, and these will have the same dispositions towards the general government. The people, by throwing themselves into either scale, will make it infallible, and if their rights are invaded by either, they can make use of the other as the instrument of redress. Number 4, why would the states, which formed a federation for the limited purposes enumerated in Article 1, Section 8, ask one branch of the federal government to opine on whether a law approved by the 2 other branches exceeds the enumerated powers of the Congress and encroaches on the reserved powers of the states and the people, which is the 10th Amendment? All 3 branches of the federal government have been unified against the Constitution. The states and the people for a very long time. Why would states put themselves in the position of supplicants to a court which has already shown itself to be contemptuous of the Constitution and of the states and the people's reserved powers? And number 5, will the states and the people surrender to the likes of the former DNC Chairman Howard Dean, who doesn't care if the stuff passed by Congress is unconstitutional or not? And or will the people and the states man up and defend our Constitution? So the states have every right to say these laws are unconstitutional. And actually, we do see this in some states. For instance, some states have already said that if the government passes the gun laws or the UN Arms Treaty, they will nullify those laws because it's not constitutional. And basically this article went on to say, we have instructions from the author of the Declaration of Independence, the father of the Constitution, and the author of the most Federalist Papers. They explain what our Constitution really means, and they pretty much tell us what we need to do. And basically states need to start manning up, like this article says, and when the federal government puts something out there that's not constitutional, they need to say these are null and void. And again, those states that are on the verge of default, like New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, Maryland, Illinois, and California, Colorado, they have their own problems, so they are creating these draconian laws, and those states are not going to say the laws passed by the federal government are unconstitutional. Okay, let's move on here. The NSA was keying on some words, and there's a lot of words here, but this article, I believe this was from, actually I forgot where this article was from, but let me just check here. This article was from Business Insider, and it goes on to say these are some of the words that the NSA was using to track people, and some of their favorites were dictionary, sweeping, ionosphere, military intelligence, Steve Case, Scully, and I just think that's hilarious that they're keying in on these type of words. And I have a whole list of words that they use here, and it's just a lot of different words that they were keying on, you know, violating everyone's Fourth Amendment and lying to the American people and being traitors to the Constitution. Now, there was an interesting article in the RSA's Coviello, Cyber Attacks to Worsen, and he goes on to say that cyber attacks are going to worsen as years go on, especially when IP version 6 comes out, when all systems are hooked up to the internet. Cyber attacks will be more widespread than they are now. But you have to remember, the United States have been doing cyber attacks on other countries now, and they figured out a way to bring down infrastructure like power grids, water supplies, and this is why General Alexander, when he was quoted saying that in his experience, other cyber attacks, the United States is prepared for a cyber attack on a scale from 1 to 10 as a 3 from his experience. And his experience is that he is doing cyber attacks on other countries like Iran, making it so their nuclear power plant they can't get it to work. And CNN a while back, and I had it on the site, you're going to have to look through the archives, and I think one of the episodes I had the video, CNN showed how a power generator is susceptible to a cyber attack, and you see it start to shake, smoke, and eventually break down, and the power goes out. The U.S. government uses worms and malware like Stuxnet to break into the systems. They place the malware and viruses onto the systems, and then they wreak their havoc and just destroy and steal data or siphon money out of banks however they want to use it. And we are going to see, and I've said this before, we are going to see this happen here because this is their main event objective. Is if everything else fails, the gun bills, which are all pending in the Senate right now, CISPA, which is pending in the Senate, and if they can't get this war started because they need it to cover the economic collapse, because they do not want to be blamed, the government, the Fed, the central bankers, on this whole thing falling down. So when you say, oh, is the collapse going to come tomorrow? Remember, they can't let this happen just yet. They still have certain things which they need to do. They need to pass the gun laws. They need to get the guns away from the American people. They need to get CISPA passed, and they need to get these wars started so when they just let it all go, they can say it was another country. If this collapse happens beforehand, it will be very difficult for them to blame it on someone else. Because you have to remember, cowards don't like to be blamed. They like to point fingers elsewhere. So they will use this cyber attack as their last-ditch effort. They will put us all into darkness for a couple of weeks, and those people who are not prepared with food, water, medical supplies, and weapons, forget it. I mean, gold and silver is important, but when you're sitting in the dark and you have no refrigerator, you don't have generators, you weren't prepared for this, and the power is out for 2 to 3 weeks, and if you don't believe me, what I'm saying, go back to my previous episodes, because DHS has already reported that if there is a attack on the power or the infrastructure, power is going to be out for weeks. And we even had people from the utility companies saying the same thing. Hagel has said the same thing. So that just shows you that they are preparing for this. And once the power goes out, they will declare martial law. If they haven't already, they will do gun confiscation to let everyone know this is for your safety, because the power is out and we like to keep everyone safe. They will start siphoning money out of the banks because the bail-ins wouldn't have worked, so they need the rest of the money out of the banks, so when the power comes on, they can point the fingers at a country saying that they're the ones who wreaked havoc on all the banks. Wall Street took your money, put us into darkness, and the economy is collapsing because of that, and we need to go to war. The American people in Congress, since they've been in the dark for 2, 3, 4 weeks, are going to say yes, start up the war machine, and the central bankers will jump up and down in joy because they're going to make money on both sides of the war, providing both sides with weapons and supplies, and loaning the money to governments where they'll have to repay it with interest. And they're also going to see a depopulation around the world, because that's what war does, and the whole system starts over unless we stop it. Okay, let's move on here. Now, there are more false flags. I have the potential false flags on the right-hand side of the x22report.com site, and now there are more false flags. You have to remember, what did I say? We are going... the U.S. government, the Fed, central bankers need to get us into war. They need this war started. And they need to get the guns, of course. They need certain things to be in place. So they need some type of false flag, and they're going to try this first. There is a New York City chemical drill happening in the subway systems the month of July, starting July 1st. We have the March on all the capitals with loaded or unloaded guns by gun owners. We have a toy gun march now on Washington going across the bridge into D.C. And we have the National Scout Jamboree, and there's a drill there for biological weapons. And now there's additional biological weapon drills going on. And these drills are taking place on June 25th in Alabama, July 15th in Wisconsin, July 16th in Colorado, and July 26th. I'm sorry, August in August 2013 in California. And we're going to see something happen because there's just an awful lot of drills. And every time they have a drill in any location, 9/11, there was a FEMA drill. Boston bombing, there was a bomb drill at the same time. Every time there is something major, there's always a drill. So we also have June 28th, the Quantum Drill 2, which is a cyber attack on all the financial institutions. So there is a lot happening, and like I said, they're going to try to push us into war and do this before they use the main event of the main cyber attack. So we're going to see a lot of things happening, and all these pieces are falling into place. And all of these things seem to be set up perfectly for them to proceed with these type of false flags. And all I'm saying to everyone is, everyone, please be prepared. Have food, have water. Yes, gold and silver is important, and you should be investing in gold and silver, especially now with the prices so cheap. They keep knocking it down for us physical buyers. It's very nice of them. They put everything on sale. It's almost like having a sale in Best Buy where they're saying that all HD TVs are now half price. Well, guess what? Gold and silver are now half price. Go buy some up. Right now, if they do declare martial law and they do declare, if there is a blackout, just make sure that you have food, medical supplies, water. Be prepared for that. Be prepared with weapons, because with all this going on, we don't know what's going to happen. But they're going to have to do something that, especially like to get the guns and gun bills passed. They're put up against the wall right now. They don't know what else to do. So when someone's put up against the wall, they turn to blood, gore, killing, even more so than they would normally do. And we are going to see this really turn out very bad, especially if they use the chemical drill in the New York subways. People are going to die. There's going to be mass confusion. If they use the march on all the capitals of gun owners, we're going to see a shootout. People will die. They will say gun owners are crazy. We have to declare martial law. This is backed up by the DH Insider, by Doug Hagman, where he says martial law is coming between July 4th and 7th, and it will be different in each city. And I hate to say it, but this gun march sounds like it fits in perfectly. Now, again, we can always be wrong, but it seems like if we just connect the dots and we use our brains, it seems like all of this stuff fits. Listen, everyone, I want to thank you very much for listening. I want you all to have a great day. Get prepared. Be safe. Be well. And thank you very much for listening. Have a great day.